Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the cinema. This is the podcast Cinemacast. For those of you movie review lovers, if you have yet to do so, hit that like and subscribe button down below. If you do enjoy our content, if you enjoy our episodes of Cinemacast and our other podcasts as well on here. And also, while you're down in the description section, check out the links to our other streaming platforms, social media, and Discord as well. So before we get into today's feature, let's talk about Bob Clark. All right, Bob Clark, born Benjamin Clark, of course. You know, we're not going to do a whole history lesson on him, but this is a guy who directed a lot of movies. And well, not a lot of movies, but movies that you may know him well for, such as Porky's, Porky's 2, Christmas Story, My Summer Story, horror movie Popcorn, Super Babies, of course, or was it Baby Geniuses? Yeah, Baby Geniuses 2, and quite a few other movies. Now, he's got quite a few comedies and classics under his belt, especially the beloved Christmas classic, which we might do this month for Cinemacast, is A Christmas Story. And if you haven't seen A Christmas Story, you are missing out. You know, this is a Christmas classic. Not too many people care for it, but this has become a staple in the holiday season. You know, like Halloween has, John Carpenter's Halloween movies. Thanksgiving has movies such as Dutch, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Home for the Holidays, and now, the beloved new slasher film that just came out that we just reviewed, Thanksgiving. So, just about every holiday has their own traditional holidays-based movie. Christmas time has A Christmas Story, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Elf, and so many others. Miracle on 34th Street, so many others. But one that sticks out, one that sticks out was directed by Bob Clark from 1974, which is titled Black Christmas. Now, when you hear the name Black Christmas, if you're a youngin' today, you're probably thinking about the, maybe the 2006 movie, or the one that just came out within the last couple years or so, which is actually a remake of the remake, which makes no sense. But we're going to talk about the one that began it all, the one that started it all, Black Christmas, 1974. Now, this movie was originally titled Silent Night, Evil Night in the United States, and retitled to Stranger in the House for television screenings. Black Christmas, I feel like it's got that dark, cringy feeling to it. That real dark, sinister tone to the holiday season. It's like, what could possibly go wrong at Christmas time? What could there possibly be, that's not so jolly and joyful and happy with the holiday season? Anything can happen, right? Now, this movie is inspired by the urban legend, The Babysitter, and The Man Upstairs. Now, back in the 70s, there was a movie that came out called When a Stranger Calls. It's either the 70s or the 80s when that movie came out. It was released by Paramount Pictures. And of course, it was remade back in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. Now, the original movie, I'd never seen the remake. Usually, when it comes to horror movies, I usually never go to see a remake on them. Now, some remakes do hit the mark. Some remakes are pretty damn good. But others, it feels like they drag the original copy. They drag the original through the mud and dirt and all that, and just shit on it for a modern day audience. And people of the originals are like, okay, well, what the hell is this? This never happened in the original. I understand it's a remake, reboot, whatever, but it's like, it doesn't feel like what you're calling it originally. It's like you're turning it to a mismatch of bullshit, But, this movie was inspired by The Babysitter and The Man Upstairs. And like I said, the movie When a Stranger Calls follows that same suit. You start to begin. Now, the original movie, before I get into Black Christmas, When a Stranger Calls, that movie, it has two different tones to it. It has a very terrifying, suspenseful tone, and then it has another tone, like I want to say within the first 25, 30 minutes of the movie on up to the last 10, 15 minutes, where it's like you're following the killer, you know who the killer is, you know. I forgot I wasn't even paying attention to most of the movie, actually, you know, when I watched it. But it just had it had a somewhat minor comedic tone to it, and it felt like just an ordinary 70s crapola movie, you know. But the movie plays very well within the first 20 minutes of it, where you got the babysitter who's, you know, the parents, you know, they're at a party, kids upstairs sleeping, and she starts receiving these skin-crawling phone calls where he's asking, have you checked the children? Have you checked the children? And the entire time, you know, she's very nervous, you know, she's being harassed by this guy on the phone. He's talking about coming to kill her and shit, and he's like, have you checked the children? Go upstairs. She calls the police, and the police say the call is coming from within the house. Well, Black Christmas follows the same suit. You know, it's inspired by The Babysitter and The Man Upstairs urban legend and a series of murders that took place in the Westmount neighborhood of Montreal, Quebec. The script was written by A. Roy Moore. Moore wrote the screenplay under the title Stop Me. The filmmakers made numerous alterations to the script, primarily shifting to a university setting with young adult characters. The movie was shot in Toronto and was distributed by Warner Brothers. Okay, so Warner Brothers probably later on, you know, because I don't remember it being distributed by Warner Brothers. Now, this movie. Now, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to go ahead and go right into the plot of the movie, and then we'll talk about the remakes, too. If you have yet to see this movie, please, go watch it. If you don't want any spoilers, go watch it, see how good it really is, and come back to the review. If not, let's get right into it. So the movie starts out with an unseen man who climbs into the exterior of the house. It's a sorority house. By now, you know, you already heard me say they took it to like a college. So, you know, it's a sorority house full of girls, you know, and there's a Christmas party that is being held. And he enters the attic. And the whole time, this guy hides in the attic. You never really see him. He hides in the attic. And of course, the phone starts to ring, and a sorority sister by the name of Jess Bradford answers the phone to discover it's an obscene phone call from the person who has called there before, whom the sorority had nicknamed the Moaner. Now, this has like a little bit of comedic tone, you know, because they're making fun of him, you know, because all he does is moan and breathe on the phone. But then Jess and the other sorority members listen to as the caller rants on and screams in strange voices before abruptly threatening to kill him. She was upset by the call, so a younger student by the name of Claire Harrison decided to leave and goes upstairs to her bedroom to pack her suitcase. But then is where she is attacked by the killer, who was hiding in a closet and kills her. Now, this scene is kind of iconic because you do see this from time to time with movie reviews and trailers and such, where you see the guy standing there in the closet and all you see is his eyeball looking out at her. Now, mind you, in the original, you never really find out who the killer is. You don't really know who he is. And that's the mystery of the whole movie. That's what makes the movie terrifying, because you know this killer's there, but you don't know who it is. You don't know why they're attacking, why he's harassing them, or anything like that. So then the following morning, Claire's father arrived, saying that Claire had failed to meet up with him at the train station. The house mother, Mrs. McHenry, offered to help Mr. Harrison look for her later that day. Jess informs her boyfriend, Peter, that she's pregnant and plans to undergo an abortion, much to his disapproval. Meanwhile, Harrison and two other sorority members, Barbara and Phil, attempt to report Claire's disappearance to Sergeant Nash, who does not take them seriously at first until Chris Hayden, Claire's boyfriend, barges in angrily later that day and demands that something be done. Now, before I continue on, this movie also stars the legendary John Saxon. If you don't know who John Saxon is, he played the father in the movie Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy's father. He's been in a slew of horror movies and action movies and such. You know, he's definitely somewhat of an actor. I don't know if I would call it legendary, but you know, when you hear the name John Saxon, you immediately think of Nightmare on Elm Street. So anyway, a search party begins and is held that night for Claire, in which Harrison, Chris, and most of the sorority girls get involved. Meanwhile, McHenry discovers Claire's body in the attic before the killer murders her with a crane hook. Shortly after, Jess answers another obscene phone call and decides to file a report to police. Shortly after, Lieutenant Fuller arrives with a telephone lineman to tap the phone so that the police can determine the identity of the harasser. After Fuller leaves, a group of Christmas carolers appear at the front door. As Jess watches the singers, the killer sneaks into Barb's room and stabs her to death with a glass unicorn figurine, with her cries of help being drowned out by the carolers. So this kill right here, it gave the killer a good enough time to pretty much kill her, because she's going to be screaming. She's going to be screaming. So while everybody's distracted by these carolers at the door, they're not going to hear her cries, for help. Jess then receives another phone call, in which the killer emulates parts of an earlier argument she had with Peter. Lieutenant Fuller calls her to say the attempt to trace the call had failed, and they both began placing suspicions toward Peter. Jess and Phil decide to lock up every door and every window in the house. Shortly after, however, Phil is murdered by the killer after identifying Barb's body. Jess then receives another obscene phone call, which successfully is traced by the police. Sergeant Nash instructs Jess to leave the house immediately after the calls are coming from inside the house. Jess then goes to alert Barb and Phil, only to discover them dead. Jess sees the killer's eyes staring out through the door crack, and she slams the door against him and flees. The killer then chases her and is unable to open the front door. Jess runs into the basement, locking it behind her. Shortly after, though, Peter breaks through the basement window and slowly approaches Jess as he worriedly asks if she is okay. In a state of panic, Jess beats Peter to death with a fire poker, and the police find her barely conscious as she cradles Peter's body. Believing that Peter was the killer, the police put Jess to bed and leave her alone in her bedroom, with the police officer standing outside. However, the killer's voice is heard from the attic, and a shadow is seen descending the attic's ladder before the house telephone begins to ring, implying that the killer is still alive. So as I stated, in this movie, you never know who the killer really is. But usually in a lot of slasher movies and horror movies as such, usually, when you try to identify a killer, and it's usually somebody that you think, and it ends up being some kind of a twist, and then turns out it's not. Take the movie Valentine that came out, I believe, in the early 2000s, where you knew who the killer was, or you believe who the killer was. Turned out it was somebody completely different who set somebody else up. So there's always some kind of clever twist when it comes to slasher movies like this, where, especially, holiday-related slashers, like I said, Valentine, Black Christmas, maybe Halloween, and so, well, Halloween, you know who the killer is, to begin with. But I will say, in our review for Thanksgiving, there was a clever twist with who the killer was. But in this movie, however, which makes it so clever, is that you never know who the killer really is, you barely see his face, and the killer ends up getting away while somebody else gets the blame. So he's in the shadows, all the glory is being hailed by somebody who ends up getting killed off, but he still reigns supreme. And of course the movie ends where, yes, he is still alive. He is still tormenting these girls. But that is the cleverness that Black Christmas has upon people when they watch this movie. And this movie has received somewhat of a cult classic, a cult following. And it's definitely one to pretty much watch every year around Christmas time. Even with the legacy, Black Christmas eventually gained a cult following, as I stated, and it's notable for being one of the earlier slasher films, or the earliest actually, came before Halloween. It went on to inspire other slashers. The biggest one of all is John Carpenter's Halloween. Black Christmas has been included in multiple lists, various media outlets, as one of the greatest horror films ever made. The film was ranked number 87 on Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments. and it was also ranked number 67 in IndieWare's The Best Horror Movies of All Time. Now, the remakes. What can we say about the remakes? The 2006 remake somewhat takes a slight turn in a direction where it seems kind of confusing, but it gives it a whole new plot. Bob Clark's Black Christmas, the original, takes you into a sorority house with an unknown killer. You never know who he is. You don't know his motives. He just comes and stays, and then pretty much in the end has the last laugh. But in the remake, we are given a killer, however, by the name of Billy Lenz, who was born in 1970 with severe jaundice due to liver disease and is constantly abused by his mother, Constance. 5 years later, Constance and her lover murder Billy's father, Frank, on Christmas Eve and bury the body in the house's crawl space. Billy witnesses their schemes, so they lock him in the attic. Fast forward to 1982, Constance rapes Billy to conceive another child, since her boyfriend is impotent, and gives birth to their daughter, Agnes. On Christmas Day, 1991, Billy escapes the attic and disfigures 8-year-old Agnes by gouging out her eye. He then brutally murders his mother and her lover. He is then caught by the police eating cookies made out of the mother's flesh, and is sent to a mental asylum where Agnes is taken to the local orphanage. So already for a modern day audience in 2006, you're given a very grotesque version of Black Christmas. And of course, by then, like the early 2000s, you got a lot of these horror movies that come out, these intense slashers. A lot of these horror movies, these slashers, they try to go in the direction of gore porn, basically. Movies such as Saw, Hostel, remakes of Last House on the Left, and such. So there's a lot of movies that came out back in the early 2000s where they thought they could push the limit for their time. Such as back in the 70s and the 80s, where movies thought they were pushing the envelope for being the most goriest or the most, maybe not terrifying, but a lot of horror movies rely on gore, blood, rather than the acts of suspense and terror. But this movie definitely gives it a very disturbing twist with two characters, and also implementing a sort of incest, where the mother is raping, her son, and just to have a child, and only for this son to disfigure the child, murder his mother and all, and making cookies out of mommy, so cannibalism and all. So I'm not going to go into the whole synopsis of the movie, because basically it follows the same formula, almost sort of as like the original Black Christmas, but with a different ending where you know who the killer is, which turns out to be Billy and Agnes, and somebody, the last girl, the remaining girl, ends up killing off Billy at a hospital. Now, when I saw this movie, and mind you, I do take it to heart with the original Black Christmas. I'm usually somebody who enjoys the originals, and sometimes a sequel does work. A sequel can work, but then there's times where a sequel doesn't work, and then there's times where a sequel can be just enjoyable, even though in the back of your mind it's trash, it's garbage. This movie received a 14% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and you guys already know how I feel about Rotten Tomatoes. But the site's critical consensus reads that it's a gratuitous remake of the 1974 slasher. Black Christmas pumps out the gore and blood with zero creativity, humor, or visual flair. On Metacritic, the film was given an average rating of 22 out of 100 based on 17 critics, indicating generally unfavorable reviews. Jeanette Katsalis of the New York Times wrote of the film with a peephole-riddled set and a flashback-heavy screenplay. Black Christmas smothers terror beneath a blanket of unnecessary information, revealing too much and teasing too little. And despite some nifty camera work, A shot of an asylum inmate gobbling Christmas dinner cuts seamlessly to a couple snogging in a car. The movie is a dismal Christmas card to its predecessor. Need I say more? So this movie, like I said, it puts too much out there. You know, there is no suspense to this movie. There's no, not even really a twist. You know, you already know who the killer is. You know what's going to happen. Just like with the movie House of Wax. House of Wax, when that came out, it was a remake of the 1960-some classic with Vincent Price. And, of course, you know who the killer is, but they tone up the gore and the violence in the movie. And I think at this period of time where people were kind of enjoying movies like this, there were fans of the originals, there were fans of horror movies in general that were looking at them with tongue-in-cheek expressions. And a movie like Black Christmas, you know, that comes out in 2006, and it tries to be the new Black Christmas for a new generation. It's like, how can we shock people with a title like Black Christmas the way the original did back in 1974? Well, in 74, you know, you got to think of the time period. You got to think of what was really going on up there in Quebec with a lot of these babysitter and mysterious man in the house urban legends. That's where the terror and suspense came in with the movies like this, where you were feeling for these characters. You were feeling for the victims of what was going to happen and what could have possibly happened. You have an unknown killer in your house. Well, then again, you don't even know he's in the house until you learn that he's in the house. People start disappearing. You're like, okay, what the hell is going on? There's somebody in the house. You don't know where they're at. You don't know what's getting ready to happen. You don't know who's next. Whereas with the remake here, it's something completely different. And it tries so hard to be something that it could have been, but it isn't. Now we come to this one. Came out in 2019, and I did not see this movie, and thank God, because I heard this one was pure garbage. Even though it seemed like it did a little bit more better in the ratings than the 2006 version, but this one, named Black Christmas, of course. This is part of the Black Christmas series, and even though three movies, guys, all named Black Christmas. 1974, 2006, and then 2019. My God. This is the loose second remake to the 1974 classic after the 2006 film, and follows a group of sorority girls at Hawthorne College as they are preyed upon by an unknown stalker. Why should I even read the synopsis? I mean, I don't know if I will ever watch this movie, but it's almost like when I see the trailer for it, it doesn't even feel like what the original started out as. It doesn't even feel like what the 2006 movie started out as. I'll give you a little bit of synopsis here. While walking home, Hawthorne College student Lindsay is killed by a masked individual. Riley Stone, a member of the Mu Kappa Epsilon sorority, struggles with PTSD after being raped by Delta Kappa Omicron fraternity president Brian Huntley. Meanwhile, her sorority sister Chris has angered the DKO fraternity and Professor Gelson following petition from the requesting of the university. Alright, so this is already seeming like modern day trash. That's how I look at certain movies nowadays. They're usually modern day garbage. And this movie was released by production company Blumhouse Productions. Now, Blumhouse has somewhat of a reputation behind them right now, especially for me, with certain lists of movies. And I've seen quite a few of them. Now, Blumhouse has tried to make a name for them, you know, over the last 20 years. Yeah, it was founded in 2000. Holy shit. Founded in 2000. You know, one of the key people was Jason Blum. Now, I can look through and I can list out a list of different movies that were released under or produced by, Blumhouse, such as the Paranormal Activity movies, Insidious being one of the biggest ones, of course. You got the Purge movies, the Ouija movies, the Lazarus Effect, Area 51, the Sinister movies, and then, of course, A Happy Death Day. I still ain't watched that movie. Black KK Klansman, it's a biographical black comedy by Spike Lee. I'm not too crazy about Spike Lee, but then you got movies like Halloween, the Halloween trilogy that follows 40 years after the original, and my thoughts on those really quick are, they should have never even really done it. They should have never did a newer trilogy. They should have just did something original rather than try to be a sequel to the original. They should have just did something new, something fresh. So that's all I gotta say about that. Like Halloween Ends, complete garbage. And then you got The Exorcist Believer, which came out recently, which is another sequel to the original Exorcist, but I feel like it did a little bit better than the Halloween trilogy, but not by much. And then the last movie that just came out, Five Nights at Freddy's, it's an okay PG-13 horror movie, but it's made more for the children because it's based off a kid's video game, Five Nights at Freddy's. But there are also good movies that have come out under Blumhouse, such as The Black Phone, the Insidious movies, Megan, which was really pretty good. It's a female version of Chucky from Child's Play, but it's a fucking robotic, doll basically. There's the movie Us from Jordan Peele, it was all right. Some of these movies were decent. They were all right. You had Prey, which is the prequel to the Predator movies, I believe. I think that's the one I'm looking at. Never mind, it's something else. But Blumhouse, they have somewhat of a reputation when it comes to certain movies. And this movie, was produced by Blumhouse, Black Christmas. And I really don't know what else to say about it. Like I said, it's got a 39% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The website's consensus says that this is better than the 2006 remake, yet not as sharp as the original. This Black Christmas stabs at timely feminist themes, but mostly hits on a familiar hope. So I think that's where it gets me right there, where I don't want to watch this movie because, as it states right there, it stabs at timely feminist themes. So it has to be kind of politically correct in a sense with this movie to fit its times. And that's what, Hollywood, a lot of these production studios, they want to go for. Something that fits the quota, something that fits the time, just so it doesn't offend anybody. So it's like, let's make a Black Christmas for this generation. And of course, maybe in about another 10, 15 years, we'll see another Black Christmas. By then, people will say, that's pretty racist because it's got black in the title. But who the hell knows? So I would say, this holiday season, if you want to watch Black Christmas, stick with the original, the Bob Clark classic. So if you're watching A Christmas Story, if you're watching cheery little Ralph Parker wanting his BB gun for Christmas, before you watch that, check out the nice dark slasher from 1974. Get a good scare in before you can go to sleep at night and watch the cheery little Christmas Story. What do I think about Black Christmas? Like I said, it's a cult classic. I definitely enjoy the original a lot more than I do the remake because of the suspenseful atmosphere of the movie, the mysteriousness of the movie itself, with the story, the plot. The plot is just as is. You have an unknown killer. You don't know why he is. You don't know who he is. He's just there. He's doing what he's doing. And then you figure out, okay, we know who the killer is. Okay, you killed him. But guess what? You got the wrong guy. You ended up, killing off somebody that wasn't any relation to that. So now you got an issue. Now it's like, okay, is there going to be a sequel? Well, for me, when it comes to classic horror movies like that, you don't need a sequel to follow up. You never do. Especially when a movie is as good as it is. Why would you want a sequel to ruin the story? Why would you need it to ruin the legacy of what made this movie incredible? No, it's not very impressive like Halloween, but it's what inspired movies like Halloween. Movies that were, revolve around a holiday. That's why, Halloween came to be what it is. They figure, okay, Christmas already has a slasher to it. Let's make one centered around Halloween, the Babysitter Murders. But then John Carpenter comes in and he said, you know what? You want me to direct? Let's change the name of the film to Halloween. I want it set on Halloween night. And when we go to air the movie, let's air it on Halloween. So John Carpenter has some good ideas for that movie, and it worked out very well. So, you got a holiday movie for Halloween. You got a holiday movie now for Black Christmas. And, of course, come this year, you got a holiday movie for Thanksgiving, a nice slasher movie that takes it back to those roots, where who's the killer? You got the suspenseful, the suspenseful story. You got all, everything that a slasher requires to be a good movie, and that's what Black Christmas is all about. So, if you want to watch Black Christmas this season, check out the original 1974. Don't go with the. If you want to go with the 2006 remake and try it out, it's an all right popcorn flick, a one-time watch. I would not recommend watching it every year because it doesn't have the same effect as the original would. As for the 2019 version, if you sadly seen this movie, you probably already feel how I feel. I haven't even watched it yet, nor will I probably ever will watch it. So Black Christmas 1974, guys, my rating on it, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Definitely a cult classic. Check it out. So anyway, that is it for today's episode of Cinemacast, guys. Thank you for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below. If you want to follow us on any of our streaming platforms, social media, and our Discord server, you want to be part of our Discord server, all the links are down below in the description section, guys. And until next time, for next week's feature, guys, we'll catch you right back here at the cinema.